is Nick LaRusso. I'm professor of medicine, biochemistry, and molecular biology at the Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota, where I've essentially spent my entire career as a physician scientist. I was president of the AGA in 2007, one of the most positive professional experiences of my life.
Could you give us a brief background on how you got into medicine and also specifically gastroenterology?
Oh, that's an interesting question. I was the first born in my family I had 4 siblings, and I was expected to get an education. I had always been fascinated by the doctor who would come to our house on a regular basis to give me a penicillin injection because I always got strep throat. And his name was Dr. Melnick, and he was a wonderful, compassionate, thorough, friendly individual who I think subconsciously led me to think that I was going into medicine at a very early age. So that was sort of an evolution rather than a concrete decision, as I suspect it is with many people. I got into gastroenterology by accident, actually. I was in my 3rd year as a house officer doing my internal medicine residency at Mayo, and I couldn't decide between gastroenterology and cardiology, so I didn't make a decision. I planned to do a locum tenens in a nearby town in southeastern Minnesota to make money to help pay off medical school and college loans. And someone got drafted. And I got a call from the head of the GI research unit, Bill Summerskill, and said, "You think you'd be interested in GI?" And that's how I got in. That's how I wound up in GI. It was something that I gravitated to, but couldn't pull the trigger on a decision. And then when this individual got drafted, I took his place on the GI training grant. Interestingly, that individual was Al Shia, who, after serving in the military, came to Mayo to finish his training and became a world-renowned hepatologist. So, like a lot of things in life, it was a bit serendipitous and unpredictable, but I've been very happy with the selection of gastroenterology and ultimately hepatology, which is my main clinical and research area of attention.
What would you tell someone who's considering a career in gastroenterology or hepatology today?
Oh, that's an interesting question, and I suspect you get a variety of different perspectives. I think that gastroenterology as a science and as a practice is rapidly advancing. The science is staggering. One of the interesting things about gastroenterology is it's more than one organ. And one can pick and choose an organ of interest within all the organs that encompass the digestive disease system. Secondly, the technology is advancing rapidly in the sphere that really gives us our identity, namely procedures, developing almost on a daily basis new ways to provide alternatives, for example, to surgery for both diagnosis and treatment. And So I think the science is going to advance rapidly, clinically oriented science, but also basic science, which has been something our organization, the AGA, has always held in high regard and helped to advance through multiple funding mechanisms, including the AGA Foundation. The practice will continue to evolve. I think that we're going to see more care at a distance models, virtual consults for many of the situations that do not require a person being in bricks and mortar for example, for a procedure. I think there are opportunities in areas like regenerative medicine that GI is a particularly in a position to advance. Artificial intelligence, especially in the area of endoscopy, where ultimately we're going to have machines telling us what they see and comparing it to what we see when we do procedures. So I think GI will continue to advance in the practice and in the science, which is what the AGA has always balanced. I suspect too that the nature of GI education may evolve as we increasingly think about, particularly for career and physician scientists, how to integrate bioinformatics into the armamentarium of physician scientists who fundamentally do cellular physiology, molecular biology, et cetera. And I think there are enormous therapeutic advances, and there's no reason to think those two areas are not going to continue to rapidly advance along some of the lines that I suggested might be opportunity areas.
Can you tell me what motivated you to join the governing board and also to eventually become president?
Well, I mean, it was a combination of my interest in wanting to contribute to what I considered then and still consider now the premier the premier organization in our subspecialty. When I had the opportunity to initially get involved, it was through the usual mechanisms, abstract reviews, serving on the research committee, and then subsequently chairing it. The more I learned about the organization, the more enthusiastic I became about it. And so, given the opportunity to be president, which I saw as being committed to execute the strategic plan in a continuum. I think that I never saw my presidency as taking things in directions that were not consistent with the strategic plan, because I thought what needed to get done in multiple presidencies. And so I was a big advocate of that type of continuum. And I think the other thing, in addition to wanting to contribute to the science and practice, was to be able to continue to interact with the people that I met. These were among the smartest, most intelligent, most dedicated, hardest working people that I had ever had the opportunity to meet. And many of them became mentors to me. For example, Bob Glickman, when he was president, talked to me about being editor of gastroenterology, which I did for 5 years with great enthusiasm. And learning from people like Marty Brotman, who unfortunately we lost last year. I did have the privilege to write his in memoriam for our journal. Taught me so much about just about everything. Marty was uniquely capable and effective in everything he did, but especially about taking over for him as chair of the foundation. So I think I got as much, if not more, in terms of professional satisfaction as I contributed to the evolution of the organization.
What do you recollect from your time as AGA president? What kind of issues was AGA focused on at the time?
Yeah, it's been a while. I think our relationship to the other organizations, which I tried to promote, and many of my predecessors and successors did. Strategic decisions about, given the more focused orientation of the other organizations, the AASLD on liver, the ASGE on endoscopy, the ACG on, one could make the case, I'm not sure how accurately, but greater focus on practice-related issues than on science. Making a decision that the AGA had been and should continue to be engaged in all three of the things, the science, the practice, and the education associated with gastroenterology in general, I think was a topic of discussion at almost every governing board. Finances were almost always a topic of discussion, particularly solidifying the support for the research awards. Ian Taylor was treasurer at the time. He was remarkable in figuring out how to do that, because in the past, we'd sometimes go between not having enough money to have more money than we could spend. And anyway, so relationship to the other organizations, the areas that the AGA should continue to contribute to, stability of finances, particularly so we could support research in a confident and ongoing fashion. There were always challenging issues dealing with our publisher, especially when I was editor of Gastro, trying to figure out some of the finances. But those were all fun things because it was a strong team effort when I was on the governing board, as I recall it. A commitment to a strategic plan, a set of values that really, in my opinion, were unique and uniquely appropriate for an organization like the AGA. It was fun. It was fun, and I would come home from the governing board meetings having made new friends that I might try out at Mayo when I was chief of GI or chair of the Department of Medicine. So that period was one of the highlights of my professional career, as I've mentioned.
What impact did leading AGA have on you personally?
In one sense, the largest impact had to do with the people that I met, some of whom I mentioned. I'm pretty much of an extrovert, and I like being around people that I like being around. And just about everybody involved in the leadership during the time I was involved, whether it was chair of the research committee, editor of Gastro, president, whatever, excuse me, these people were the creme de la creme. And that was a highlight, but also accomplishing some of the things during the period that I was on the governing board that I thought made the organization stronger, better, meaning more effective as well as more efficient. Having an impact on the journal, that was a highlight of my career. So all of those things. I mean, I was associated in one way or another with the AGA and these leadership positions for probably over a decade. It was the people, it was the science, it was the innovation in practice and education. It was the fundraising, which I had an opportunity. It was everything, Jessica. I don't think I can highlight one thing that stood out. They all stood out for me.
If you could share your thoughts on where AGA is today and what you hope is to come in the future for the organization.
I think in some ways, and I don't think I'm overstating this, although I'll acknowledge that since I'm not directly involved in the leadership, I may not be totally up to date on the overall status of the organization. I assume it's financially stable. I assume that membership is stable or growing. I assume that our commitment continues to be in all three shields: practice, research, and education. I'm hopeful that the foundation is on solid financial grounds. To the extent that where appropriate, we can partner with the other organizations, both in the United States and increasingly overseas. I think we should do that when it's in our best interest and our judgment is in the best interest of the organization, of the specialty. I think we should be willing to compete when we feel we should compete. And always strive to be the best in each of the areas that within which we compete. And I just heard, as an example of the extraordinary progress, that the most recent impact factor for gastroenterology is over 30. I think that's accurate, Jessica. And if that's the case, that's remarkable, which is just another sign of how well these various aspects of the organization are doing.
Is there anything else you want to share that I didn't already ask you about?
I think maybe I would share my encouragement for any young people to get involved with the organization. You will not be sorry, and it's very likely that your experience will mirror mine in terms of professional satisfaction. Yeah, my message to the young people is get involved with the AGA. Thank you all of you who have listened to my comments for the last 10 minutes or so. And let me end by saying happy 125th anniversary to the greatest organization on the planet.